Hello everyone. This evening I want to tell you my story, which actually happened not so long ago. Look, I worked for a very short period as a night watchman at a factory on the outskirts of the city. You'll soon see why I worked there for such a short time. My shift was at night, and I already had experience working those hours since my previous job was also as a watchman, but at a school. So, you could say I had some experience, and that's why I accepted this job without a second thought. Although my wife wasn't very happy about it since it was in a very remote and dangerous area of the city, with frequent confrontations between criminal gangs. Despite being aware of this, I knew nothing would happen to me since I'd be inside the factory the entire time. Finally, the day came, and I started the job. The place was huge, more like a warehouse, with a metal roof. It was very cold since it was winter when I started working there. The first few nights were normal, but one Saturday night something happened that changed everything. I was in the factory working, making my rounds, when suddenly I heard footsteps on the roof. It struck me as very strange because the roof was too high for anyone to get up there. I went out to check but saw nothing. I simply let it go since there was nothing I could do at that moment. That same night, around 5 in the morning, I heard very unsettling screams coming from inside. I checked the entire place but found no one. Confused, I finished my shift and just wanted to go home to rest. The next night, the footsteps on the roof started again. I got up from my chair and went outside to look, even though I couldn't see much since the roof was too high. This time I shouted, asking who was up there, but obviously, no one responded. Honestly, I didn't feel scared at that moment. I thought it might be some local kids without any purpose. However, I still couldn't explain how on earth they had gotten up there. I shouted again, telling them to get down because it was private property and that I would call the police, but again, there was no response. I went back inside the factory and tried to call the authorities, but strangely, there was no signal on the phone, and without a signal, there was no internet either. This started to really bother me since there was no reason for the line to be down. I checked the cables and everything was connected. I thought it might be a problem with the company, but how convenient for it to fail at that exact moment. For a while, nothing more was heard from the roof. I just hoped the time would pass quickly because there wasn't much to do without a signal. I couldn't even listen to music. It was almost 3 in the morning and I got up to make another round in the large space. As I walked, I heard a loud bang outside the factory, like something had fallen from the roof and hit the ground hard. I ran out to see what it was but found nothing. I circled the place but didn't see anyone or anything lying on the ground. I went back inside to check if there was a signal, and as I walked back, I heard a noise, but now it was inside the factory. That's when I truly felt scared because whatever was on the roof had now managed to get inside. I asked again who was there, while turning my head in all directions, trying to locate whoever had gotten in, armed only with my body for protection since I couldn't carry weapons. No one responded, so I took my flashlight and walked to where I thought I had heard the noise. I froze instantly upon seeing a figure standing behind one of the machines, only half its body visible in the darkness. It took me a few seconds to gather the courage to shine my flashlight on it. But when I did, the figure disappeared. I removed the light, and there it was again, peeking out. My entire body started shaking because the energy in that place felt so negative. I could sense it wasn't a person. It was something evil. I started praying since I'm a firm believer in God, and that was my only defense at that moment. I kept praying while slowly taking small steps backward. Suddenly, I heard a cynical laugh and a masculine voice saying, "I am God." I ran out of there immediately, got into my car, completely tense, and drove away, leaving all my things in the factory. I was so scared that I even confess I cried on the way home, which felt like an eternity. The next day I went to resign, omitting the real reason why I was quitting. Months later, I told this story to my new boss, where I'm currently working, also as a watchman, but during the day. He told me it wasn't surprising that such things happened there. He shared something I didn't know, that the factory was very new, but before, it was an abandoned warehouse used by organized crime to commit all sorts of atrocities against their enemies and even some innocent people. It was said they also performed satanic rituals there to gain power and protection. This all happened between 2010 and 2015, until the place was bought by some foreign businessmen to turn it into a factory. He was very surprised that I had worked there at night and told me he couldn't imagine the vibe of that place, saying I was very brave. But as the saying goes, what you don't know can't hurt you. And I swear if I had known what used to happen there, I would never have taken that job, knowing I would have to be there at night, in the middle of nowhere, inside a place with a very dark past. Hello everyone, and I want to share my macabre story here. I wish to do it anonymously since I am not supposed to talk about what happened to me at my previous job, as stated in my contract. But I really can't stop myself from sharing this, as it seems so eerie and twisted, and I'm not the only one who experienced it. Other security guards had warned me. To give you some context, I worked as a security guard at a small shopping mall compared to others in the United States. I moved there at a young age to pursue the American dream, and this was my first job. They assigned me the night shift, mentioning that it was very difficult for them to keep a guard for that shift. For some reason, everyone quit within a week or two. They never told me why that happened, but honestly, I didn't care. I decided I would prove I could handle the job and more. Besides, the pay was good, so I accepted it immediately. I spent the whole afternoon at the place receiving instructions and a bit of training. In short, getting prepared to work there. I would start that very night, so I decided to stay until my shift began at 11 p.m., when the mall was already closed. I went to the food court within the mall and bought something to eat from a vending machine while waiting for my shift to start. I sat down and called my aunt, who I was living with at the time in the US, to tell her the news that I had a job and would start that night, letting her know I wouldn't be back until 7 a.m. After hanging up the phone, a man around 60 years old, dressed in a janitor's uniform, approached me while cleaning the tables. He said he couldn't help overhearing that I was the new security guard. He was also Mexican, so he felt comfortable making small talk. The man was very friendly with me the entire time. He gave me some advice and told me he had been working there for over a year. I noticed he wanted to tell me something but seemed hesitant. I told him he could tell me anything and to feel comfortable with me. He responded, "I don't want to scare you or make you think I'm a liar or that I wish you bad luck at work. It's quite the opposite," the man said. I reassured him that he could tell me whatever he wanted, that I wouldn't take it badly, and that it would actually help me perform better at my job. I thought he was going to tell me they were very strict there, or that there were many people who discriminated against Mexicans, but what he said was completely different and truly made me think. He said that security guards at this place don't last more than a week or two. There have been many rumors that at night, when there is no one around, you can hear voices inside one of the stores on the upper floor, the one that sells clothes and has many mannequins. A guard who was here before me, also Hispanic, told him he was going to quit because he saw one of those mannequins move, and that it wasn't the first time he heard them talking inside. He also told me that last year, a lady complained to the store manager because she went shopping with her 5-year-old daughter, and in a moment of distraction, her daughter disappeared inside the store. Minutes later, they found her crying in a corner, and she claimed a mannequin had spoken to her and asked to borrow her eyes. Upon hearing this, the mother, of course, thought it was a store employee and asked the manager to check the cameras to see who had said something so morbid to her child. But the manager refused, and the lady left without knowing exactly what had happened. The man told me all of this. I listened somewhat incredulously but didn't want to be rude to him. I simply thanked him for sharing what had happened before at that place, joking that I had experienced worse things in Mexico with real people, so mannequins couldn't scare me. The time finally came, and my shift started. The mall closed, and the lights went out. I began working with great enthusiasm, even liking how I looked in the uniform. I swear I started the night with the best attitude. At first, everything was normal. I was watching the cameras, as it wasn't yet time for my first round. It was about 1 a.m. when I noticed something on one of the cameras on the upper floor. I saw movement in one of the stores. I zoomed in to see better, but it was too far away and the image was very blurry. But it was clear that something was moving inside that store. I took my flashlight and decided to go up and take a look. It was the same store the janitor had mentioned. Honestly, I got a bit nervous after hearing those creepy anecdotes, but I was still somewhat skeptical, which helped me go and check despite my nerves. When I arrived, I saw that everything was perfectly normal. There were a few mannequins that looked quite unsettling because they were very modern and lifelike, but they were all properly arranged. Well, at least that's what I thought. Clearly, I couldn't enter the store since it was closed and had an alarm. I just watched from outside and saw that everything was relatively normal, so I went back to my post. Time passed and it was time for my first round. I started on the ground floor, which was calm and completely normal. I was going up the stairs when suddenly I heard laughter. But what terrified me the most wasn't the laughter itself, but that the voices weren't normal. They didn't sound human. It was more like robotic sounds, as if something was trying to imitate a human voice. Imagine hearing that. I tried to stay calm and not let my imagination run wild, so I continued up to the second floor and started my round. I walked around the entire floor, and it was time to pass by that store. I walked by very slowly but saw that everything was normal, though I found something very strange. I was almost 100% sure that a mannequin on the counter behind the store window was sitting on a bench when I first checked, but now it was standing. I stood there for a few seconds or minutes, honestly I don't remember, trying to recall if the mannequin was actually sitting as I remembered, or if I was just imagining things. But I swear the mannequin was sitting the first time I passed by. I walked away and continued checking the other stores, but that thought kept haunting me. Suddenly, I heard those strange voices again, and this time they were behind me. Without thinking twice, I almost ran back, and I swear I saw the mannequin was now sitting again behind the counter and slightly turned its head towards me and smiled, staying exactly as it should be. Seeing that was something I didn't expect at all. I thought they were just absurd rumors. I really didn't know how to react. I stood there staring at that mannequin, which kept looking at me with those unsettling eyes. It no longer moved, standing completely still as it should, but I could feel it watching me. Though I kept telling myself how absurd that was, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination after everything the man had told me. So I just went downstairs and returned to my post. I was sitting alone in front of the cameras going over what had happened, but suddenly I detected movement on one of the cameras again. It was the same one pointing at that store on the second floor. But this time I saw very clearly something standing inside that store, staring directly at the camera, waving its hand very slowly, as if it knew I was watching. It was something so eerie. I zoomed in to get a closer look, and indeed it had the same shape as that horrible mannequin. Of course, I didn't go out to see what was happening. On the contrary, I stayed there, frozen, not knowing exactly what was going on. I don't know how much time passed, but suddenly that mannequin simply stepped back and was no longer in the frame. Watching that was too unsettling and left me very uneasy. I played some music to clear my mind and try to calm down while continuing to monitor the security cameras. But then, I detected movement in that same camera again. This time, not only was one mannequin standing behind the store window waving at me, but the entire window was filled with mannequins waving and smiling with those creepy bright smiles that I can't get out of my mind to this day. I jumped out of my chair in fright. I had to change the camera view out of fear because I couldn't bear to watch anymore. My heart was racing and I kept telling myself to stay calm since I couldn't afford to quit this job on my first day. But my whole being was telling me to do just that. I no longer felt safe being there. Who would feel safe in a place where mannequins come to life at night and even during the day, as I remembered the story of that woman and her little girl? I also couldn't stop thinking about the image of that mannequin asking the little girl to lend it her eyes. What a macabre phrase. In case you're wondering, I quit the next day, and I don't regret it. In fact, I think it was the best decision I could have made. I don't know what those beings are or what to call them. I know this story sounds very cliché, but it really happened, and I don't doubt it continues to happen unless someone has done something about those mannequins. They shouldn't be there. I don't know their story or why they come to life. I'm sure they're not good. They like to instill fear in people, and I'm certain the mall owners know exactly what happens with those mannequins and have done nothing about it. It can't be a coincidence that several security guards have quit within a short period for the same reason, and I also found it very strange that they made me sign a document stating I couldn't talk about anything I experienced there. Very strange. In any case, it's something that still remains unknown, and I don't think it will ever be fully understood. But it left me with a deep fear of mannequins, so much so that I avoid going to clothing stores where I think there will be these kinds of mannequins with human-like faces. Hello, community. My name is Eric Benavides, and I hope everyone is doing well. I want to share an anecdote that happened to me a few years ago when I worked as a night watchman in the morgue in the city where I lived. A friend got me the job since he also worked there as a janitor. Honestly, at first it didn't seem like a bad idea because I've always been the kind of person who thinks that we should really fear the living and not the dead. The pay was good. The only downside was that the shifts were at night, which initially didn't sit well with me because I wasn't used to it. But I accepted it anyway because I really needed the job. Nothing had ever happened to me in that place because I was always outside in the guardhouse. Almost every night there were forensic doctors working inside, and my job was to watch the place from the outside. But one night I had to go into the reception area because the doctor called me to ask if I could check if he had left his phone at the reception. He was at home and couldn't find it anywhere, and he figured he had left it there since it was the last place he had been filling out some papers. I hung up the phone and went to check. The place was almost completely dark since they only left a small light on. I turned on my flashlight and started checking the desk where the doctor's phone was indeed located. I picked up the phone to leave the place and call the doctor so he could come and pick it up. But before I could take a step, I heard a whisper calling my name. Eric, Eric, echoing from down the hallway. I turned around suddenly, somewhat scared as my skin prickled with goosebumps. "Who's there?" I asked while shining my flashlight down the hallway, but no one responded. From where I was, I couldn't see the end of the hallway. I knew my job was to check it out because someone could have broken in, and I obviously had to get them out. This made me quite nervous because I wasn't allowed to carry any kind of weapon, and of course I thought it was someone who had broken in. I never thought it could be something paranormal or anything like that since I didn't believe in those things. I didn't hear my name called again, but I still started to approach slowly, shining my flashlight, with my radio in hand in case I needed to call for help. I saw that the light in the room where the forensic doctors worked with the bodies was on. It was visible under the large door, which didn't seem strange to me since I didn't know the rules for how they should leave the place. But the strange and macabre part happened when I saw someone walking behind the door. I saw that silhouette so clearly passing very slowly behind the door that I immediately knew someone was in there. And it wasn't someone who worked there, because by that time, everyone had signed out with me. All the employees had to pass by my guardhouse and sign out with the exact time of their departure, so I knew no employees were left inside. I swear it took me a long time to gather the courage to push those doors open and see who the intruder was, but just as I was about to do it, the reception phone rang. I ran to answer it, and it was the forensic doctor, the same one who had left his phone there. He was worried because he was calling the guardhouse, and I wasn't answering. I apologized and explained what was happening. He told me that he had been the last one to leave the place, leaving his work area's light off as he always did. He couldn't explain why the light was on in the first place, and the strangest thing was that someone could be in there since the doors were locked, and the key was in a secure lockbox with a code to open it. He told me to call the police, and he was on his way to pick up his phone. We hung up, and I was about to call the police, but something stopped me. I don't know exactly what it was, but I felt that I first had to check if there was really someone in there. So I walked back down the hallway very carefully and stealthily. The light in that room was now off. I pushed the doors open with my foot, flashlight in hand. They opened, despite the doctor saying he had locked them. I shone my flashlight into the corner of that large room, where there were only bodies covered with sheets on various gurneys. It felt very strange being in that place. There was a dense atmosphere, something I had never felt before. I didn't want to go in completely. I stayed at the door, inspecting the place with my flashlight from side to side. As I mentioned earlier, all the bodies were lying on the gurneys. But when I swung my flashlight back, I saw that one of the bodies was sitting up, still covered with the white sheet. My fear was so great that I ran out of there, dropping my flashlight because of how tense the situation made me. As I was leaving the place, I saw the forensic doctor walking towards the entrance. I felt a lot of relief that there was someone else there with me. He saw me in my state of terror and agitation and approached to ask what had happened, to confirm if there was someone there. I told him it seemed like there was, with everything that had just happened to me. The man asked if I had already called the police, to which I responded that I hadn't, because I first wanted to make sure there was really an intruder in there. Without saying a word, the doctor ran to his work area and turned on the light. I stayed at the entrance calling the police. Suddenly, I heard the doctor call out to me, and I went to him quickly because I thought he was in danger. But the man was just standing there in the room observing all the gurneys. "Tell me which of all the bodies was the one you saw sitting," he asked. I pointed with my finger at the body I had seen sitting up and told him it was that one. The doctor approached the body covered with the sheet and uncovered it. My shock was great when I saw that young man without life, with various marks on his body. Out of respect, I won't describe exactly how he looked because it's not necessary. But it turns out that this young man had been deprived of his freedom for a whole month, and when his family paid the ransom, they delivered their son in that condition, already dead. The forensic doctor told me all this as he uncovered the body, explaining to me in secret that ever since the body arrived at the morgue, noises had been heard in that room while he was away from it, even though he was completely alone in the place. The doctor told me, "We need to be empathetic because, even if you don't believe it, this isn't the first time something like this has happened to me. It almost always happens with bodies that had a tragic end, as if they can't rest." I listened to him and couldn't believe it. My shock was so great that I forgot I had called the police. I only remembered when I heard the sirens outside the morgue. So I ran out to explain the situation to them. They still went in to check the place, but obviously, they couldn't find anything. There was no one else in there besides the forensic doctor. I thanked the officers for responding to the call, and then they left, along with the doctor, who asked me to keep it discreet with the other employees. I started reviewing the camera recordings, and indeed at no point did it show anyone entering or leaving the place. I really wanted to find some explanation that made more sense, but there was none. The next day, when I got home, I started looking for another job because I was sure I didn't want to keep working there. I stayed for one more week until they found another guard, and then I resigned. I still can't wrap my head around the idea that a deceased person called me by my name, as if they needed my help or something like that. I still don't fully understand what happened that night, but I still have nightmares about it. I wasn't prepared to see a body, much less in that state. Without a doubt, that situation left me with a severe trauma. Thank you for listening to these stories. I hope you enjoyed them. Much more content is on the way. Subscribe and activate the little bell so you don't miss any of the upcoming videos. Have a great evening, everyone. See you next time.